Good evening, Sewing Ministry friends. I've had several requests about the face masks, so I want to show you the pattern that I have chosen to use. I talked to Janice Rouse, and she said that as an OR nurse, the mask that she prefers has pleats. So I've made a mask with pleats. It has a wire in the top portion to fit over your nose. It also has a pocket right here, so that if you are working with someone who already is sick and you want to protect yourself even more, you can fold up a Kleenex and put an extra filter inside of your face mask. So let's get started, and I'll show you how I make them. I've got 2 pieces of fabric. I'm using flannel on the inside because it's nice and soft, and then a nicer fabric on the outside. I'm going to start by sewing the 2 squares together. They are 8 by 8 inch squares. So I'm putting right sides together. And on one edge, I'm going to sew a seam, leaving a pocket in the middle. So I'm going to start at the edge, make a 1/4 inch seam, and I'm going to make it about 2 inches. Back stitch, and do the same thing on the other edge, about 2 inches. So there's my first seam on my 8-inch squares. I'm going to press that seam, and then I'm going to open it up and press it nice and smooth. Turn it back to the back side and open that seam up. And press it open. Now I'm going to top stitch that seam. You'll see that there's my opening. I'm going to top stitch it about 1/8 of an inch from that seam, all the way around. Okay, now my seams are pressed open and they're top stitched. The next thing I'm going to do is fold it so that about 1/2 inch of my prettier fabric is showing on the lining side. About 1/2 inch. And I'm going to press that. My little iron doesn't seem to be getting very hot. Now that I have that pressed, I'm going to top stitch right along this edge, pretty close to the edge. I want to form a pocket in this area for my twisty ties. So I want to find the middle spot of this twisty tie, which is about 5 centimeters. And I'm going to mark it. And find the middle of this fabric. If I place my twisty right there, I need to go just to the other edge of it and place a pin. I don't want to sew on the twisty tie, so I'm going to go just past it on both sides. And that's where I'm going to make my pocket. I'll stitch it right where that pin is. Forward, back, forward, and back. And the same thing where the other pin is. So now I have a little pocket right there where I can put my twisty tie. All right, now I'm ready to sew the bottom portion of this mask. You'll notice that it's not the right length anymore. Now I could have told you to make it 8 by 7, but I think that's a little bit more than an inch, so that's why I just leave it 8 by 8. I can always trim this edge off. Alright, so now I'm going to turn it right sides together. I'm looking at the wrong side of my fabric now. And I'm going to pin it. And stitch that seam at 1/4 of an inch. Going to give it a little press. And turn it right side out. Now that I have it right side out, I'm going to give it another press. I want to get that seam nice and flat, and I'm going to top stitch it again. About 1/4 of an inch. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and put my wire in it, my twisty tie. I'm going to slide it in on one side, slide it in on the other side, and I want it to push way up to the top, right up to that seam, because I want to stitch right below it so that it can't come out. Now that wire is in there securely, it won't be moving around. It'll stay right where I need it to be. The next thing I need to do is make my pleats. I'm going to fold down that top edge about 2 inches and then fold it back up, making a little pleat that's about 1 centimeter. I want to pin that in place because I don't want it moving around. And then I'm going to make another little pleat about 1 centimeter on this side and on this side. I'm going to try to get them as even as I can. And one last pleat. Now, I'm a little bit too far to the edge, so I'm going to move them up just a little bit or make this pleat a little bit smaller. So if I make it a little bit smaller, I can get my last pleat in there. That looks a little bit better. So I need to make sure that it matches on this side. Pull it tight and see if they're pretty straight. I'm going to go ahead and press them a little bit. I want those pleats to stay right where they are, so I'm going to take a very small seam right there along the edge, maybe about 1/8 of an inch, because I don't want it to show. And I'm sewing downward with the pleats. Can't find my threads. There they are. Notice that my pleats are going down. This is the top part where the hole is, where the nose piece is, and my pleats are going down. So I want to stitch it at about 1/8 of an inch over here. So now my pleats are a little bit more secure. Remember, I had 2 strips of fabric that are about 2.5 inches wide by 5 inches long. I'm going to take the first one, and I like to work from the back side of my fabric. I want it to extend at least 1/2 inch over the edge. So a 1/2 inch extension on that side. It's going to be a little bit more on this side, and I can trim that off. Now stitch it at 1/4 inch. It was a little bit off at the beginning. I'm going to go back and check that again. Get rid of all those extra threads. Alright, you can see that one's over about more like 5/8 inch, I guess, somewhere along in that area. And I want this side to match it. So I'm going to trim this side about like that so that both sides match pretty close. Okay, and stitch the other side with your other piece of fabric. Notice I'm stitching my right side of my fabric to my lining portion, to the lining side of my mask. 1/4 inch seam. And I'm going to trim this side so that it matches. Okay, I'm going back to my ironing board and iron those out flat. Alright, here's the reason for that extension on the edge. We want to be able to turn this over. I kind of like to fold this up just a little bit and then turn it over so that I don't have any raw edges sticking out. But I'm going to turn it and then I'm going to pin it. Same thing on this side. Turn it and pin it. And I'm going to press those. Then I'm going to fold that edge up about a 1/2 inch and then over to cut right up to the edge where that seam is, right where my stitching is, and pin it again. Oops, I forgot to do something. Unpin. I'm going to stitch this down right here. That way it doesn't come, doesn't poke out of the casing when you put your elastic in. So I'm going to stitch it at about a 1/4 inch, starting right at the seam, all the way to the edge. 1/4 inch to the seam, to the edge, excuse me. Same thing on the other side. 1/4 inch to the seam. Now, I'm going to fold this about a 1/2 inch and then over to the seam and pin it. I want to cover up that stitching. So there's where the seam is, and I'm going to pin this right up against that seam. And then I'm going to top stitch about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. That's going to form the casing for your elastic. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. The first thing I did was to fold the edges in and press. I'm going to stitch that 1/4 of an inch from the edge just to keep it in place. Same thing on this side. Okay, I'm going to turn it up about a 1/2 inch and then find the edge of that seam, cover up that seam, and top stitch it in place. Sure, I'm glad you can't see my floor because there's red threads and black threads and all color threads all over the place. All right, there it is. I've got my wire right there. That's where my nose is. And it can expand just like that. The only thing I have left to do is put my elastic in. I cut 2 pieces of elastic, 10 inches long, and I'm going to run them through that casing. You can use a safety pin to run them through that casing. There's one. And two. Now my elastic for my face mask doesn't need to be 10 inches long, but I made one and tried it on John, and the elastic for me that would fit me did not fit John. It was too short. So since we don't know who's going to be wearing these masks, I decided we'd better be safe and make the elastic long enough for whoever happens to get it. So to make this personal for each person, or make it so that it fits each person, I'm going to take my elastic and just tie a loose knot. That way whoever gets this mask can adjust it to where it fits their face. I'm going to make it kind of loose. Alright, so let me show you what I've got. Here's the one I made, I believe that fits John. If you're working with someone who's already sick and you want to try to keep from getting sick, you might take a Kleenex and fold it in thirds. And then you can insert it in this little pocket as an extra filter. Cloth is not really going to stop all of the germs. It deters them, but not all of them. So if you put an extra filter inside, that's even more beneficial. So I just took a Kleenex and inserted it inside. I didn't do a very good job. It's not laying very flat. But there's my Kleenex inside. Now with this elastic, once you get it adjusted to where you want it, there's my knot. I can just pull it to where that knot goes inside of that casing and is no longer visible. Like that. Okay? So now to see it on, here we go. I have to take my glasses off to try it on. But here's how it looks. I'm going to find the center for my nose. Goes over my ear and over my ear. I can pull it down. I can make it tight across my nose. And it keeps me pretty well protected. So I hope that helps you out. If you want to make some face masks and you need elastic, come by the church tomorrow and I'll have some there. I'm going to go ahead and cut out some more pieces of fabric tonight. If you don't have any felt, I'll have some at the church ready to be made. If you have any questions, be sure and call me at the church tomorrow. Thank you.